Okay, so this will be my visual section of the project. I will be following the steps and going through how to create a simple Java code. This is basically just an introduction of a small portion of Java programming. And it just explains some simple rules and everything that is used in certain programming languages, and Java specifically for this one. So for this example, I'm going to be making a bank account class with a constructor and a few different methods, and I'll explain all this terminology the best I can throughout the video. But I'm going to make two classes, so two different programs. I'm going to make a bank account class and a tester to test everything that we're going to write in this class. So to start off, I'm using JGrasp. It's just a coding environment that includes Java. Well, it does have other programming languages such as C++ and Python and things such as that, but I so far have only learned Java. And to begin any Java code, you're going to want to make the class header. And so the syntax for this is public class and then whatever you want to name this said program. And so I'm going to name it bank account, spelled like that. And in programming in Java specifically, spelling and capitalization definitely matter, because a whole bunch of errors you can fix just by looking through for typos or looking through for certain things that might be capitalized and things that aren't, because those things are very particular in this. And so now that we have declared our class header, that's going to be the name of the program. So the file that this program is saved under must be the same as this class header. So if I go to File, Save As, and I'm just going to save this to my desktop, the file name right here must be spelled the exact same way, have the exact same capitalization and everything in order for the program to work correctly. And the curly braces right here in Java are used for indentation and hierarchies of methods and constructors and anything, essentially. It just shows what falls under what specific object or tool. So everything is going to fall under our bank account class. And at the beginning of any program where you're going to be creating a constructor for an object, the object in this example being the bank account, we're going to need instance variables. These variables can be string, integers, doubles, and that basically is a data type. It tells you what the variable is going to hold. So if I do private int, well, now let's do private string name, semicolon. That is going to be a private variable, which means that it can't be accessed by an outside program. And then it specifies that it is a string, which means that it's a list of characters in the alphabet. And then name is the name, I guess, for our variable. So if I could name it XYZ feet, I don't know. So anything will work. You can put anything here, but it needs to be something that you can easily reference and it relates and just makes sense to the program. So this variable is going to be holding the name that will be assigned to it from the bank account. And so we're going to make it equal to nothing. And so whenever you create a string, it must be inside these two quotation marks, and then anything you write in here will be what that string is equal to. So if I just leave it blank for now, then that'll work out because we'll assign it a value later. And so another one we're going to need is private, cannot spell, private int, we'll make this balance because this will be how much money the person has, and we're going to set that equal to 0. So int can reference a number, and double references a number with a decimal place. Whenever something's an integer, it has no decimal points, it's just a full number. And so now that we have our two instance variables set up here, we're going to need to create the constructor. And so you can have multiple constructors in a program, but the way that you know it's a constructor is that it has the same exact name as the class header. So this is a bank account class, so the constructor needs to be public bank account, and then in parentheses next to it you have your parameters. The parameters are what the person creating the object is going to fill in. So if somebody wants to make a bank account, then they're going to have to create the bank account and tell me what the name is and what the balance is for this bank account. So I'll have string in name. That's just what I like to name it because that's the name that they're putting into it. And string in balance. So, not string in balance. This is what we want to be an integer. So whenever somebody creates a bank account object, in the parentheses next to it, they're going to have to put a string and then an integer, and that tells us what the name and balance is going to be. So if we put another curly brace here, what we have to do, the reason we created these instance variables is because now we need to make name equal to in name, and balance is equal to in balance, and close that off. The reason for this is because we cannot actually reference in balance and in name in other methods, because since we instantiated those within these within these parameters, I should say, they can't be referenced outside of this constructor. So once we have this ending curly brace here, these variables go away and we cannot access those again. But by setting them equal to our instance variables, which are declared outside of the constructor, it can be referenced throughout this entire program. If these instance variables were public, they could also be accessed by an outside program, but for this case we don't want that. In most cases you don't want that to be the case for your instance variables. So now that we have the bank account constructor with a string and an integer, we can go ahead and make some identical constructors, because whenever, for the sake of this is not how you would make an actual bank account, of course, but say somebody creates a bank account but they only put in a name. See, we can have the same integer name here that's up here, because as I said before, this variable goes away. I don't know why I called it an integer, it's a string, but this variable name in this instance of the variable goes away after this closing curly brace, so I can use the same name here if I want to, or I could call it something else. But for the sake of parallelism and everything else, I'm going to keep that name. And so over here, I'm going to make the name equal to in name, and since they didn't describe a balance, I'm just going to make balance equal to 0. Or I don't have to change balance at all, really, because balance is already equal to 0. So let's make another one. Bank account. Let's say somehow, for some reason, they managed to create a bank account without a name, but they give us a balance. So we can do int in balance, and then in curly braces we make the balance equal to in balance. Now, one rule of Java programming is that since name here is a string and this is a string, I can make them equal to each other. But say I were to do name is equal to in balance, or balance is equal to name, or something like that, those are two different data types that you're trying to assign. Well, that's a different data type that you're trying to assign to another data type, and that won't work because you can't make a string an integer because they are two completely different data types. And so say somebody just creates a bank account and doesn't give us any information. Well, for here, let's make the name is equal to John Doe, because that's a basic name. Notice that we have to put it in these quotation marks for it to be a string. And so somebody makes a bank account with they don't put anything in the parameters, they don't specify anything, they just want to make a bank account object and do whatever to it. Maybe they want to assign the name later or the balance later. So we'll make name equal to John Doe again, and we can go ahead and make, well, we don't have to change anything with the balance because the balance is already 0, but you could also put balance is equal to 0 here, but it's just redundant because we already established that it's equal to 0 up here. So now that we have that, just for more parallelism's sake, so I'm gonna make balance equal to 0 here, even if it is redundant, just for neatness. Okay, so essentially you don't need to make this many constructors. So far we have 4 constructors here, even though you really only need 1. And if you only have, say, this first one, anybody that wants to make a bank account class must have a string and then an integer in these parameters, or else it's not going to work right. They're not going to have a correct bank account class. But for the sake of this example, we made multiple ones in case we want to make multiple bank account types. So now we can get into some methods. So what are some things you might want to do to a bank account? You might want to check your balance, you might want to deposit, withdraw, things such as that. For the sake of this, we're going to make a set name balance, a get set name method, a get balance method, deposit method, and a withdrawal method. So we can go ahead and start with the let's start with the get balance method. So this is going to be a public method so that it can be referenced by an outside program, which in this case will be our tester program. So the next thing you want in a method header, which is what this will be called, is the return type. And so this is what you're receiving from this method. So from this, we're going to be receiving an integer, which is going to be the balance. So it needs to be public int, and then the name of your method, it'll be get balance. And then there's no parameters here. There's nothing that we need them to ask for. Well, no, that made no sense. There's nothing that there's no information we need from them in order to get the balance, because they'll be calling this on whatever bank account class they have. So say they have a bank account called Smith's account. They'll do Smith's account dot get balance, and then it'll return their current balance. So int get balance, all we need to do here is return balance, and that will do everything we need it to. It's really simple. That's all that method requires. So that will return the balance that's either established at 0 up here. The balance could be whatever they make it here, 0 there, whatever they make it there. Anything that the balance is whenever they call this method, that's what it'll return. It'll make more sense probably in the tester file. So the next one we might want to do is the set name, in case, you know, someone changes their name, something like that. So the set name, you don't need to get anything from the method, you just need to change something about the object. So since we're not returning anything, it's going to be void. So public void set name, and there are going to be parameters for this because we need to know what name they want the account's name changed to. Okay, so I had an issue with my microphone. It became unplugged, but luckily I caught it in time. So what's happening here is in the parameters for the set name method, we need to know what name they want the object's name set to, the bank account. So what we need here is really simple. All we're going to do is name is equal to in name, which will, for the sake of the example, we'll change this. String new name, since it'll be whatever new name they want in here. So name is now equal to new name, and that's all it takes. It's a void method. We're not returning anything, we're just changing something about this. And so let's go ahead and let's do another method right here. Let's do a public, and for this one we'll do a get name, and so it'll be returning the name, so it'll return a string, so that's what the data type will need to be, and get name, and we're not asking anything from them, so we don't need anything in the parameters, and this one will just be return name. And so say if somebody creates an account, say they only specify this balance right here, so they call the get balance method, it'll return however much they have in their balance. Say they call the get name method, it'll return John Doe. Say they call the set name method and they change the name to Billy Bob, and then they call the get name method, the new name they'll get is Billy Bob, not John Doe anymore. So let's space these out. That's the end of the constructors, and this starts the methods. Okay, so ending curly brace here. So now we have the set name. Now we can do a public void deposit. And so here we are going to need something in the parameters because we need to know how much they're depositing into their account, or their bank account, I should say. So public int, let's do money, just for the sake of the example. But like I said, it doesn't matter what you make the variable names as long as it's something related to their purpose or the program. So this is a void method because we're not returning anything. All we're doing is changing something about the bank account object. So what we want to do here is make their balance is equal to their balance plus however much they're putting into it. And so we don't need a return statement because, as I said, it's a void method. You're not returning anything. You're not giving them any information. The next method we're doing is the withdraw, which might be a little more complicated. It'll be a void method as well because you're not returning anything. Withdraw, and we'll do int money again. And say somebody does deposit and then they put something in this parameter right here for int money. Whatever they put there is what money will reference. But if they call withdrawal afterwards with money, it won't be the same thing, because remember, after this curly brace closes on this method, we forget about this money variable, and now we're free to use that name again right here. So on the withdraw method, we don't want to allow them to withdraw more money than they have in their account. So what we're going to do is if balance minus money, so however much they have in their balance currently minus the money they're trying to withdraw is greater than or equal to 0, then we'll let them do that. So it'll be balance is equal to balance minus money. So if their balance minus whatever they're withdrawing is more than or equal to 0, say they wanted to take all their money out and it's equal to 0, they can do that. It'll just be equal to 0. I know in most banks you have to keep $5 in account or whatever. For this example, it'll be greater than or equal to 0. So we don't need a return statement because it is a void method, and within it, since we have an if statement here, we need an else. So if it meets this condition right here, then do whatever's in these curly braces. But if it's not, we need it falls under the else statement in these curly braces. And so for here, we're going to tell them we're going to do system.out.println, and that'll just make it print out down here in this text box what's going on. And we'll do a string error insufficient funds. I'm sure I didn't spell that right, but I don't know, it looks right to me so far. Okay, so else it'll do that. So I think this is all the methods we are going to need. We have get balance, it'll return the current balance of the bank account. Get name, it'll return the name on the bank account. You can set a new name, you can deposit money, and you can withdraw money, which will only work if you have that much money in your account. So now we need to go ahead and close up all the brackets that we have so there is not any parsing error. And so if we hit this little compile button up here, we can see that it compiles with no error. The next thing we want to do is, let me make sure I'm still recording. File, new, Java, and we can make this is the second program, public class bank tester. And so let's go ahead and save this to my desktop as well, because for these to be able to use objects from one another, they need to be saved in the same location. So it has to be the same name again, bank tester. And so opening curly brace. The main method header for Java is public static void main string args, I believe. So anytime you're just not creating constructors, you're not creating methods or anything, this has to be up here at the beginning, and then you can put whatever you're doing and it'll pop up down here in this text box. So what we are doing is creating a bank account object. So if we do bank account Micah, let's just use my name. Micah's, I don't know if an apostrophe can be in the name. So we'll just do, I don't know, test is equal to a new bank account. And right here is where we put our parameters. So we can put a string or a integer, well, a string and an integer, just an integer, just a string, or nothing. Say we were to put an integer then a string, we're going to get an error because there's no parameter that meets that. This has a string and an integer, but it's not in the same order. So we're going to go ahead and follow that first one. I'm going to do, we'll go ahead and put my name. And then I have $1,500, that works. And so now if I do a system.out.println and I do test.getName, remember all that this is going to do, all the system.out.println is print it down here so we know what's going on within the program. So test.getName, well, let's make it a little fancier. So just for formatting purposes, we'll do name space plus test dot get name plus, and then if we do this again, and this is just a sign in Java to create a new line, that's just for formatting purposes, that doesn't necessarily have to be there. Plus get name, plus in, and then we have balance, and that string, and then plus test dot get balance and parentheses, and then for formatting purposes, let's just go ahead and add another blank line, and we are done. So compile that. As you can see, there are some errors. Semicolon expected, everything has to end with a semicolon except for method headers, or any headers for that matter, and loops and if statements, because if there is a, say I were to come back here, put a semicolon on the get name method right here, it would skip right over this and that method would not be usable. Or say I went to the withdrawal method and I put a curly brace on this if statement right here, it would ignore that because it wouldn't go further into the if statement because there was a semicolon at the end of it. So I have to put that there. What is the other error? And there's also one expected at the end of this, which I thought I put. And another error you'll see it gives is an reach end of file while parsing. And basically what that means is that we did not close off our curly braces. So if we go ahead and do that for the sake of the results, compile that. Compiling just scans through it and makes sure there's no errors. If we run it, it'll actually run the method and get the results. As we can see down here, we have name Micah, balance 1,500. So now if I were to do test dot set name Billy Bob, since I said that earlier, and we compile that, that's correct. It's not going to make any error, but it also didn't print anything because it was not a return method. And notice that I called these methods that did return things in the system.out.print, because say I were to just do test.getName, it would return it, but it wouldn't know what to do with it. It wouldn't print it out down here. But say I wanted to have it print out in the print line, I need to have the test.getName, because at that point it'll return the string, and here it'll return the integer. So if I set the name to Billy Bob, then I copy this line right here. So all this is doing is printing out the name and balance, and I run that again. As you can see, the first time my name is Micah, balance 1,500. The second time the name is Billy Bob with the same exact balance. Now say I want to test dot deposit, I earned another 1500 somehow, semicolon at the end of there, and say I copied this line, ran it here. See, there's me with 1500, and then Billy Bob with 1500, then Billy Bob with 3000. So, oops. Now, so these lines each test out the get name and get balance method, and the purpose for this tester method, of course, is to test all the methods and constructors that we've created. And I won't test out every single constructor because there's no need for it really, but just to make sure that every method works out how you expect it to, this is needed. So this tests out the deposit method. Each of these test out the get name and get balance. I don't think I'm forgetting it. Get name, get balance, set name, deposit, and withdraw. So now I'm doing the withdraw. Test dot withdraw. So say I want to do 5,000. I don't have that much in my account. So what should we expect? I don't even need to have this line here. Well, I'll go ahead and do it anyways. Let's say I run this. Me with 1500, Billy Bob 1500, Billy Bob 3000, and oh, we tried to withdraw more than we had, so we got an insufficient funds. But then we printed out the line again, so again it returned Billy Bob with 3000, because since it had insufficient funds, it didn't go through with that withdrawal method, so you still have 3000 in here. But say I were to do test dot withdraw 2000, because I do have that much. I have 3000 in the account right now. Then I were to copy and paste this line one more time and run it. We have all of the same things: insufficient funds, Billy Bob with 3000, and then Billy Bob with 1000, because you had that much. I had 3000, I took out 2000. It recognized that it was greater than or equal to 0, so it went through with the method. And so basically that is the visual portion of my project, creating 2 programs. I did my best to explain it. Hopefully it was descriptive enough. But yeah, so that's basically it. It's just a short introduction to Java programming.